Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Uh, Welcome everyone for to the session and thank you for joining. Basically, today's session is a series of my free VMware vSphere session. In our last session, we have covered 4 modules which I have already uploaded to my YouTube channel. So if you guys are not familiar from my YouTube channel, you can visit YouTube and search Kashif IT Trainer, and there you can find VMware vSphere class recording playlist where I have uploaded module 4 module videos, which is almost 6 videos. So this is our video number 7, and we are going to start from module number 5. So before joining this session, let me introduce myself. Maybe some of you already know me, but my name is Kashif. I am working as an inside solution architect. It's in a US based company, uh, and my job is specifically I deal VMware projects specifically, and you guys can find me by if you want to connect with me on Facebook, feel free to like my page and you can find me there. You can also ask me question directly. I have also shared my WhatsApp number on my Facebook page, so you guys can connect me there as well. Before joining this session, I want to get an idea from you people. If you guys are familiar, how if I ask you that how much you familiar with VMware technologies. So start. Let's suppose there is 5 rates. So how which number you can give to yourself from 1 to 5? 1 mean you are beginner, 5 mean you are expert. So I want to know about my audience that how much you guys are familiar with VMware technologies. Mr. Adil.
Assalamu alaikum, sir. Yes, sir. I will give myself 1.2 to 1.3.
Okay.
2.5, sir.
2.5. That's good.
Assalamu alaikum, sir. Hope you all are fine. And I am the beginner, sir. Just
Okay.
started this.
Okay. Perfect. 2 1.5. Okay. Maybe as I mentioned in my Facebook page that you guys should watch the first 6 videos where I have discussed the introduction of this VMware vSphere technologies. So today I would not discuss the basic thing here. I would start from module number 5. Let me go to the slides. So we are starting this module, which is configuring and managing virtual networks. And also let me tell you that I am focusing on I will try to cover this whole session in this sequence. Okay, perfect. Let me also share the YouTube link here in the chat box, so you guys can easily follow me and you guys can watch those videos. Okay, I'm going to mute you all because I want to be focused on my session. And if you guys have any question, feel free to unmute yourself or you can just send your question on chat box. So basically today we are going to start module number 5. We have already covered these modules in our previous session, and these modules recordings is already uploaded to the YouTube channel, so feel free to visit my YouTube channel and watch the videos. Yep, definitely I will share these videos on my YouTube channel so you guys can watch my videos again and again. Basically, in my previous session we discussed that how we can install ESXi on hardware, right? So before starting the virtual networks, let me ask you a question regarding the physical networking. So how much of you are familiar with IP addresses?
Sir, 100%.
Okay, perfect. Is there anyone who has no idea about IP addresses? About router, switch, how we connect? Okay, 50%. Mm-hmm. Mr. Noman, if you are familiar with, if you know Urdu, so I have already uploaded a basic training of network fundamental to my YouTube channel. You can visit my YouTube channel. You can watch the basic networking stuff as well. Okay, so let's suppose uh, normally we already familiar with, for example, we have 5 PCs, right? And I want to give you a task to connect these 5 machines to each other. So definitely what will you guys do? You will go to market and will get a switch, right? And one by one you will connect all the machines with each other, right? So this is how you can connect 5 PCs with each other. So this is very simple. So this is basically a physical network, right? If you have to connect 5 machines, you can just get a Ethernet switch, which would be a physical switch, and you can connect all these machines using twisted pair cable, right? So this is quite simple. uh, in today's session we are going to discuss how virtual machines communicate with each other in a vSphere environment. We already know that what is VMware vSphere. So let me start from basic and then I will try to cover the uh, advanced level option as well. As we know that when we install ESXi on hardware directly, so let's suppose this is my hardware and I have installed ESXi on this hardware, right? So before ESXi installation, it is recommended to connect your physical hardware to the network. This is necessary. These are the prerequisite of ESXi installation. So if you have to install ESXi on hardware directly, first that hardware should be connected to a physical switch. So for example, this is my Ethernet adapter on my hardware, and this Ethernet adapter is connected to physical switch, right? I don't know why the color is white, but let me connect this is right. So when we install ESXi on hardware, by default a virtual switch would be created on your ESXi, right? This is virtual switch, and your physical adapter would be connected to the virtual switch, and in VMware technologies we call it uplink, right? In physical networking, uplink is a port which we use to connect two switches, or to connect router and switch, or to connect firewall to the switch. that is called uplink. Maybe some people also call a WAN port is a uplink. So different people use uplink for different purposes, but here in VMware technologies, uplink is a port which is connected to your physical switch, right? I think we have a question. Okay, Mr. Ihsan Masood. Sorry guys, I have to assist him. So let me stop it. So I was talking about uplink. Basically, uplink is a port which connect your virtual switch to the physical switch, right? So when we install ESXi on hardware, by default one switch is created which is called vSwitch 0, right? And also, okay, sound is too slow. I think there is some issue at your end. So my sound is slow for everyone or just for Ihsan? Can someone else?
Sir, sometimes it's slow, sometimes it's proper. So yeah,
Okay.
but not for too long, just for a bit of settling. I think it's YouTube effect. It's also
Uh,
possible.
Actually, I am at my hometown and it's a hilly area, so my internet is not that much stable. But okay. So by default, virtual switch would be created, which is called vSwitch 0. So today we are going to discuss about virtual switches, right? Of VMware technology specifically. Maybe in other technologies, the terminologies or the options or the features are different. But today we will focus on VMware technology specifically, right? So that is the Ehsan, I think you should watch my YouTube video then if you have issue at my now, because this is seems like it's only to you the audio issue. Okay, so let me zoom the virtual switch here. Keep in mind that virtual switch has different components. So the main two components of virtual switch is, one is called virtual machine port group, right? Port group, and the second one is called VM kernel port group. Do you guys have any idea about virtual machine port group or VM kernel port group? Anyone? So virtual switch has two port groups. One is called virtual machine port group, and then the second one is called VM kernel port group. So when we create, what is virtual machine port group? Virtual machine provides connectivity to the virtual machine. What is VM kernel port group? If we have to assign IP address to our ESXi host for management, for Vmotion, for iSCSI traffic, or for NFS traffic, then we would need VM kernel port group. So as I discussed, maybe I did not, but let me discuss here. In today's lab, we have two ESXi hosts already installed. We have domain controller, and this is our vCenter server. So if any of you don't know about vCenter server, ESXi host or domain controller, feel free to watch my 6 videos which I already uploaded to my YouTube channel, because this is the 7th video. In December 2020 I have I had covered the 4 modules training already, so this is 5th module. Yes, Mr. Asghar, I think he has some questions, so yes.
Sir, are you recording this session? Like, will it be uploaded to YouTube?
Yep, this session will be uploaded to my YouTube channel. Feel free to watch it again and again.
Okay,
And still, if you guys have any question, feel free to connect with me on my Facebook, or you can even send me an email. And this is my LinkedIn profile, so you can also connect with me on my LinkedIn. Okay, so you can see here, let me access my lab. This is my vCenter server and I have 2 ESXi hosts here, right? So if you have to check the networking options here, you can select your host, and under configuration option you can visit virtual switches option, and here you can see we have vSwitch 0, and by default 2 port groups are created. One is a VM kernel port group and the other is virtual machine port group, as I discussed here already, that virtual switch has 2 port groups. So let me ask you a question. What is virtual machine port group? If you cannot speak, you can even write your answer in chat box. What is virtual machine port group? Anyone? I just discussed virtual machine port group, so I want to get an idea how much you are focused to the session. Mr.
Sir, two port groups. One is VMware and second one is VM virtual kernel. One is virtual virtualware.
G. Mr. Adil. Okay, that's good. Mr. Noman answer is right. He mentioned that through which we can connect virtual machine to each other. That is true, right? So if and we already know, in my previous session I discussed that every virtual machine has uh, virtual network adapter. Yep, thank you, Mr. Hamid. So for example, this is my VM01, right? And this is my VM02. So each virtual machine has virtual network adapter. Okay, let me ask you a question. How much virtual network adapters we can connect to a single virtual machine? Can someone answer me? Anyone? And also, after 6 minutes the session will be disconnected, so feel free to join me using the same uh, Zoom ID, because my Zoom subscription is basic, which is why the session will be disconnected. Okay guys, I ask you question, just answer me. How much virtual network adapters we can connect to a single virtual machine? Anyone? Mr. Fazal Ghani.
Thank you so much, Kashif. I just joined the session, so I would need some time. And thank you for allowing me.
No problem. Thank you for joining. Guys, Mr. Fazal Ghani is my
It's my
class.
pleasure.
He is my classmate and he is a very genius person. Okay,
Thank you so much.
anyone else? Mr. Okay, multiple. How much? This is a political answer. Mr. Rauf Khan, Mr.
Diplomatic.
Ranak. Yep, diplomatic. 5. Okay. Shumaila, can you answer this? Can you answer this question? How much virtual network adapter we can connect to a single virtual machine in VMware vSphere environment? You can write your answer in chat box. I need an answer, and I cannot go further before the answer. Anyone? Come on, guys. Okay.
Sir, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
10, sir, I think.
Yep, that's
Sir,
true.
maximum 4 adapters we can add to the machine, virtual machine.
Asghar answer was right. Basically, we can connect maximum 10 virtual network adapter to a virtual machine. Yep. Thank you, Asghar. And okay, so virtual machine port group is used to connect multiple virtual machine with each other, right? So, and as you already know that the maximum speed of virtual network adapter could be 10 Gbps, right? So using virtual switch, virtual machine can get up to 10 Gbps speed for connectivity, right? Okay. What if these virtual machine wants to communicate outside to the with the physical machines, or they want to get access to the internet or any other physical resources? So for that, the virtual machine would use the uplink of your virtual switch, right? So as I mentioned that during ESXi installation on a hardware, it is necessary to connect at least one physical adapter before installation. So during installation, a virtual switch would be created, which is called vSwitch 0, and that virtual switch would be connected to the physical switch using uplink, and by default two port groups would be created, one for virtual machine communication and other would be for VM kernel communication, which is by default used for management uh, of ESXi host, right? So that's the story. So let me switch to the slides so we can get an idea about the virtual switches and details. So finally we are here in module number 5. Let me just go to the importance. So virtual machine must be able to communicate with other virtual machine. So that is necessary because if we have some sort of application installed on our virtual machine, then definitely we would need to connect to get access to the physical machines to the virtual machine. So for that we need to understand it. So we have to cover two lessons. Today we are going to cover lesson number 1, and tomorrow inshallah we will discuss configuring standard switch policies. And here I am taking a break for 1 minute. So I was talking before the break that we will discuss two lessons here. One would be introduction to vSphere standard switches, right? So let's move forward. Okay. So these are the objectives of this session. We will focus on virtual switch connection types. I think we already discussed some of that, but we will also cover the same thing from the slides so you guys have a better idea. So as you can see here, that by default one virtual switch would be created on your ESXi host, that is called vSwitch 0. And let me also mention here that in VMware vSphere technologies we have two types of virtual switches. One is called standard virtual switch and the other is called distributed virtual switch, right? But we are not discussing distributed virtual switch in this session. Even tomorrow we are not going to discuss because this is something related to the upcoming modules. So we will just focus on standard virtual switches, but I will tell you the difference between standard switch and distributed switch in coming slides. So as you can see here, virtual switch, and these are virtual VM kernel port groups, and these are virtual machine port group. So if you start reading the slide, it says that virtual switches provides the connectivity between virtual machine on the same host or on different host. Virtual switches also support VM kernel network access for remote host management, vSphere, Vmotion migration, iSCSI and NFS, right? So even before this topic I was thinking that when we install ESXi on hardware and we give the management IP, the IP address is assigned to the physical adapter, but this is not true, right? The IP address is basically assigned to the VM kernel port group, and you can let me show you on my lab here. As you can see here, this is one of our ESXi host, ESXi 132, and here you can see that the IP address is assigned to the VM kernel port group, which is used for management traffic, right? So basically we are communicating with this host using this uplink, and we are directly communicating with the VM kernel port group. So the IP address is not assigned to the physical adapter, right? On this host we have only one virtual machine which is connected to the virtual machine port group, by default VM network. So what is the purpose of this module in this training? Basically we need to understand uh, how we can attach another uplink. You can see here we only have one adapter, physical adapter attached to our virtual switch 0, right? What if this uplink is down for some reason? Then we would lost connectivity to the virtual machine running on this host, and also we would lost the management of this ESXi host, right? Rana, can you draw a clear picture of your question? Is it a question or you are just giving a suggestion? Guys, I will stop my session whenever someone asks questions. So this is the uh, beauty of this session, that you guys can stop me anytime and you can ask me question. Okay. Okay. Yes, speak up. Nope. We don't need to assign IP address to physical NIC because the IP address would be assigned to VM kernel port group, and that VM kernel port group we could use for management network or any other traffic, right? So I will show you how we can create another virtual machine port group, how we can create another VM kernel port group, how we can create another virtual switch, how we can attach another uplink, to existing virtual switch. So all these things would be covered in this module, right? Any questions so far in this slide before jumping into next slide? I already mentioned that virtual switch has virtual machine port group. Virtual switch has VM kernel port group for IP storage, for Vmotion, for FT, for vSAN, for vSphere replication, and the ESXi management. And these are the uplink ports. So these are the uplink ports, and these are the VM kernel port groups, and these are 3 virtual machine port group. Is it fine to move forward? Any questions so far? And I can also understand some of you would not understand this session because uh, because you did not watch the previous videos, which is why you would face difficulties in this session. So before, at least before next tomorrow's session, you guys should watch the previous videos as well, so at least you have an idea what are we doing here.
Inshallah.
Thank you. So this slide is basically, this slide tells us how we can add ESXi networking. So I will cover this session, this topic in the lab. Okay, can someone explain this slide? What is this slide about? What exactly they are telling us? Anyone? Anyone who is familiar with virtual networking? This is basically 2 types of design, right? So before implementing the virtual networks of your VMware vSphere environment, we can decide which option we should go for. Definitely, do you guys have any idea regarding VLANs? Anyone?
Yes, sir. Complete idea.
Okay, please. Can you tell us?
So virtual, so VLAN is usually come into existence because on a switch is the only one broadcast domain. So for that, it's gonna be too many loops and problems and everything. So to overcome that problem, they created VLAN. So it's mean they created one broadcast domain into multiple broadcast domain in a single switch virtually.
Okay.
Logically.
Okay, so do you know how to create VLANs in a physical switch?
Yes, sir.
Okay, perfect. So what if someone asks you to create different VLANs in a virtual switch? So that's what we are discussing here. So you will also learn here that if your management asks you to create that, for example, let me access my physical host. I have another ESXi host as well. Thank you, Adil, for your answer. Let me access my another physical host which has multiple virtual machines, so I can explain it in a different way. Okay, anyone else who has idea about VLANs? Anyone?
Separated traffic.
Okay. Who was it?
Bobby.
Okay, Bobby. Bobby, where you're from?
USA.
That's good to know. And
Thanks.
what do you do?
I just joined the team, VM team, so I'm learning.
Okay. So you can see
Good.
here how much virtual machine I have on this host. I have 27 virtual machine, right? And all the 27 virtual machine are connected to the same switch, and they are connected to the same VLAN, right? So technically this is not a good practice. Maybe some virtual machines are for production network, maybe there could be some virtual machine which is just for testing and development purpose. So again, we should separate the production virtual machine from uh, test virtual machine on a same switch. So the only option we have, we have two options. Option one is to create multiple VLANs on a same switch. Option number two is to keep the test or development virtual machine on separate switch. Am I right, guys?
Yes, sir.
Okay, perfect. Yep. So the same thing we can use here in VMware virtual switch, right? So you can see here, this is my host, right? And this host has vSwitch 0, and all the virtual machine are connected to vSwitch 0, right? The same virtual switch 0 is used for management traffic as well, because the by default VM kernel port group is created, and also the all virtual machine are created. So if I have to separate some of the virtual machine, I should create another switch, or I could also create another port groups, right? So is there anyone except Bobby and Adil who has implemented VLANs on a physical switch? If not, then I would.
No, sir.
Okay, okay, Mr. Bobby, can you tell us, did you implement VLANs on physical switch?
Yes, I did.
Okay, you did. Perfect. So on Cisco switches, right?
Uh-huh.
Which vendor switches?
What do you say?
I said which vendor switches? Cisco, Huawei, HP. On which technologies did you work? The physical switches.
We use ACI, ACI Fabric.
Okay.
That's the new one. We use Cisco.
Are these
We
Cisco
usually use
products?
6. Yes.
Okay. Okay.
These API background for Cisco.
Okay. So the on Cisco switches, we just go to the specific port, switch port, and we just uh, assign that port group, assign that specific interface to the VLANs, which we already created on a switch. But here the method is different. So let me show you. If you have to create by default, as I discussed earlier, that by default only one virtual machine port group would be created, and the VLAN ID of this virtual machine port group would be default, right? So let's suppose if you have two virtual machines on this host, and this virtual machine is under VLAN 20, is a member of VLAN 20, and this virtual machine is a member of VLAN 30, right? So how would we separate these two virtual machines on a same virtual switch? For that purpose, we should create another virtual machine port group. So let me show you how we can create another virtual machine port group on same switch. So I will write here that task number 1 of today's session. In task number 1, we are going to create another virtual machine port group on same switch. By default switch, this switch is vSwitch 0, so I will also write vSwitch 0 for understanding, right? So this is our first task. So let's do this. If someone joined me recently, so let me tell you about my lab. Basically, in today's lab, I have one vCenter server, I have one domain controller, which give us facility to access my lab instead of IP. So I can also access my lab using fully qualified domain name because it has also DNS server installed. These are my two ESXi hosts. So this is my lab basically. You can see here. This is my vCenter server. The address of my vCenter server is vcenter131.mylab.internal, and these are two ESXi hosts connected to this vCenter server, right? So let me create another virtual machine here, right? And then I'm going to show you how we can create another virtual machine port group on existing vSwitch 0 and how we can assign VLAN ID for that specific virtual machine. So during creation of VM, if any one of you has question or they just want to add something, feel free to unmute yourself and speak up. Anyone? Any question or any suggestion?
No, thank you, sir. You are going very well, mashallah.
Thank you.
I mean, we can create all this, but on the back end, on this network side, they have to create those same interfaces on the VLAN too. Is that correct?
Yep, you are right.
Because two people have to do work network, and you guys have to do your work too.
Yep, that's a very good point. Basically, there is another product from VMware which is called NSX. Are you familiar with NSX?
Yes.
Yep. So the use case of NSX is that to remove the gap. I mean, even if you create VLANs here, again you have to go to your networking team, the physical, the Cisco team or any other team, and you will have to guide them that you should also create VLANs on the physical switches as well. Yep, you are right. Okay, so you can see here we have two virtual machine and both virtual machine are created to default virtual machine port group. VM network is the default name of virtual machine port group, which is created during installation of ESXi hypervisor. So if you have to create another port group, virtual machine port group, you can just select the host. You can go to configure tab and you can select virtual switches option, and from here you can click add networking, right? Here it will ask you different options. So what are we doing here? We are not creating another VM kernel port group, we are not attaching another physical adapter, but we are creating virtual machine port group for a standard switch. So in this case we will select option number 2 and we will go next. Here you have two options. Option 1 is to create the another VM kernel virtual machine port group on existing switch, or you could also create another standard switch for that, right? You can um, look into this diagram and you can get an idea. So we have two options, either to create virtual machine port group on existing switch, or you could create another switch, standard switch, but then you would also need another uplink, right? So if you have to create another switch, let me draw here. This is suppose my ESXi 132 and it has one virtual machine port group and it has one VM kernel port group, right? So if I have to create another virtual machine port group on existing switch, that is fine, right? But if I want to create another virtual switch, which would be vSwitch 1. So let's suppose I have created vSwitch 1 for which purpose? For creating virtual machine port group, right? And that port group is used for test and development, right? So in that case we would also need uplink, right? So what would be the first step? We should attach another uplink to our hardware, right? So your ESXi host must have more than one physical adapter, and that physical adapter should not be connected to any existing virtual switch, right? So for example, I have another uplink here attached to my physical host, then I would need to connect that uplink to the newly created virtual switch, right? So this port group is used for production traffic, and this would be used for the test and development, right? Even if a virtual machine connected to production to test virtual machine port group wants to communicate with a VM connected to production virtual machine port group, they would not be able to connect with each other, right? Directly. They would have to travel from this area like this. If this virtual machine wants to communicate with this one, and they both are on the same host, but still they would their packets would be travel from this thing. If both VLANs are same, if both VLANs are different, then we would need layer 3 device or layer 3 switch for inter VLAN routing. Are you getting this thing?
Yes, sir.
That's good. So I can only assume that Mr. Bobby and Adil are the only one who has understanding about VLANs and networking stuff. Am I right? Because I'm not getting response from any other one. Okay, sorry, I have. Is it fine?
Yes, please.
Okay, so first complete the task number 1 and then we can come to this portion again. So our task is to create another virtual machine port group on existing switch. So I will select this option. By default vSwitch 0 is selected. If you have multiple virtual switches, you can browse and you can find the virtual switch for on which you want to create another port group. and you can move forward, right? Here you can give it a name. For example, I want to give it a name test development, and which VLAN ID you would want to use for it. So let me, I think I did not mention here, so I can just write 20, and here you go. You can see here we have another virtual machine port group created on same vSwitch 0, right? But still again the virtual machines are still connected to the same virtual machine port group, right? So then there would be another task which we need to perform, and that task would be to right click on virtual machine and simply go to edit settings of the VMs, right? And here you can change. By default the virtual network adapter of virtual machine is connected to the default port group, so you can browse here and you can select the relevant VM port group for this virtual machine connectivity. So I hope there would be no question on this portion. Any question? Okay. So let's start. Let's discuss another task. Okay. Let's suppose I have another virtual machine on my ESXi02, for example. So let me create VM03 Windows 7. Okay, while I am doing this, if you guys have any question, feel free to ask me.
I have a question, Sir Kashif.
Yes, please.
The software that you are using, can anyone download this software or application and start creating virtual machines, or do I need some other steps?
Basically, let me.
ESXi.
Yep. As I mentioned that I have uploaded my 6 videos to my YouTube channel where I discuss the
Alright, fine.
Yep. So I have discussed the prerequisites of this course. So
I got it.
Yep. So before working on this technologies, yep. Go ahead, please.
Yes, please. I understood. I need to watch those videos and then I would understand.
Yep. And even I mentioned in my Facebook post, but looks like
I will go through them.
Yep.
I will go through the videos, inshallah.
Okay, perfect. Okay, any other question, guys, from anyone else while I'm creating the virtual machine? Again, we have 6 minutes left, so after 6 minutes this session would be disconnected because of my Zoom subscription, so feel free to join me again.
I have one question. What you do every Saturday? this
Uh,
session? Or
no, basically, we mm, in December 2020, 3 weeks,
uh-huh.
3 weekends, we covered 4 modules, and after 3 months, I have started this module, which is the uh, module number 5. So if you
Number
are,
five.
yep, if you are new to this technologies, so I would recommend.
No, I understand. I understand. I mean, I understand what you're doing right now.
He's talking about the sessions.
So nope, this would be only this week, and maybe after 2 or 3 months, I would join the. Uh, yep,
Do you do individual session too for
y-
troubleshooting?
yep,
Like,
yep. I do. I have other session as well after this free session. You can connect me, Mr. Bobby, after this session, and we can discuss things. I think I lost connectivity.
It's
So
okay.
yeah, I came to my hometown. So okay, I have a quick question from you guys. As I mentioned that I have two ESXi hosts right now in my environment, right? For example, I have VM01 here, VM02 for example, and I have VM04 here on this host, right? And this VM is a part of VLAN 20, which is test development. So, and this is also, or VLAN, this VM is also a part of VLAN 20, which is this one, right? So this is my VM02, which is already connected to, uh, if I click on my VM02, you can see this VM is connected to test and development, right? So if I have to connect VM04 to VM02, again I would need to create a same port group on my another ES6i host, right? And I would need to use the same VLAN ID for that. Are you getting this point?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So let's create another virtual machine port group on ES6i 133, but here what we will do, we will create another virtual switch for that, and we will assign another uplink. So let me show you. Each of my ES6i host has how much adapters? 4 adapters, 1, 2 and 3, right? So by default VMNext 0, which is a single adapter which is connected to vSwitch 0, right? And I have how much free adapters? 2, 1, 2, 3, right? So I could use these 3 uplinks for existing virtual switch, and I can also create another virtual switch for different traffics, and I can attach these uplinks to the other virtual switches, right? So before doing this stuff, so let's uh, do another task, which is task number 2, right? So in task number 2, how to add another physical adapter to virtual to vSwitch 0, right? So this is our another task. Before this task, our ESXi host, physical host should have maximum 2 or 3 or 4 adapters, right? Because if you have single adapter, so obviously you cannot attach another adapter. So let me show you. This is my ESXi132. By default it has vSwitch 0, right? And vSwitch 0 has only one physical adapter, right? So, and also if you check the physical adapters, so we have a total of 4 physical adapter. Among those 4, one adapter is already connected to vSwitch 0 and the other 3 adapters are free, right? So Mr. Bobby, your question was that for management, yep, currently we have only one physical adapter, which is not a good idea. So we need to connect another adapter to the switch where our management VM kernel port is created, right? So
Yeah, a couple of things. If the cable go bad, we can lose everything. Network.
exactly, that's true. So which is why we need to attach another adapter. I think sorry, I'm going to mute all. Okay, so I was talking about the task number 2. In task number 2 we would learn how to attach another adapter to existing vSwitch 0, which is also used for management traffic, right? uh, Before doing this we need to attach another adapter to our physical host. So we already have 4 uplinks, right? In production environment this is not uh, an issue, because when we purchase a server hardware, by default that server hardware usually has 2 uplinks already available. But I would suggest that if you want to install ESXi on hardware, minimum physical 4 adapters should be attached to that adapter. So this is recommended option from VMware side as well. At least 4 uplinks should be available on your physical host. So we already have 4 uplinks available. So and one is adapter is already connected. So the task is simple. You can simply go to virtual switches option, and here you can select vSwitch 0, and if you select add networking option, right? So from here, oof, okay, sorry, as I mentioned that I am my hometown, so my internet is not stable. Okay, you can see here uh, we have 3 options. So we would use physical network adapter because we are attaching another uplink to existing switch, right? And here you can select vSwitch 0 because we are attaching it to the existing switch. If you want to create another switch and want to attach that uplink to the new switch, you can use this second option. But in our case we would use the first option, right? And here you can see VMNext 0 is already connected to the same switch, so I can hit the plus button and I can select one of the free uplinks which is available on my host for this switch, right? Just give me 1 minute because I need to switch. So here you can see we have 3 uplinks available, so I can select any of these based on your physical network scenario. So I selected VMNext 1, right? And here you can see this, we now have 2 uplinks attached to vSwitch 0, right? we have two options here, three options here actually. We could use both active and as an active, or we can also select one as a standby purpose and one would be active. So in that case, only the by default the traffic will be using this physical adapter, but if VMNIC 0 goes down, so then the traffic will be shifted to VMNIC 1 by automatically. If I select unused adapter, so that means that this VMNIC 1 is not utilizing for any sort of traffic. Even if my primary link goes down, still we would lose connectivity from the network, from the management network. Then why we use this option? Because for example, you don't want to use this adapter right now, but you just want to reserve it for future purposes, so you can simply attach it to this switch and you can select the move it to unused adapter portion. So this option is used for that purposes. So for now I will select both as an active and I will move forward, and you can see here this is how you can connect another physical adapter to existing virtual switch. So now our management switch has two physical adapters attached, right? So that was task number 2, right? Any question? So let me do the same task on port number host number 2. So you can see here on this host we have vSwitch 0, we have one management VM kernel port group, and we have another virtual machine port group, and only one adapter is attached to vSwitch 0 on this host. And again we have only one uplink here, right? So you can see here this host has only one adapter attached, right? So that is not a good practice. So if you have a hardware with only one physical adapter, you should add more physical adapters. So my lab is basically nested lab. So even my ESXi host are virtual machine which I created on my physical host. I have also already mentioned in my previous videos, but let me share my lab, that how I build my lab. So basically I have only one adapter, which is this one. Sorry, I have only one hardware and I have installed ES6i directly on this hardware, right? So this is my physical host, which is this one, and on top of this is hardware I have created 4 virtual machine, right? On one virtual machine I have installed ES6i hypervisor. So this is my nested lab, right? So my lab is nested. So if you have a single hardware and you want to practice all these things, so then I would suggest to watch my previous videos where I mentioned how to build your own home lab, right? So this is my lab actually, and the other VM is used for vCenter server, right? So this is my vCenter server VM, and I have another VM which I am using for domain controller, right? So this is my nested lab for this specific session. So usually for my online classes I don't have physical hardware, I don't use them. I just use only one single hardware, which is this one, 100.99, and if I access this hardware, I can show you my all you can see here my ESXi host. This is my lab actually, right? This is my lab DC 130. 132 is one ESXi host, 133 is another one, and this is my vCenter server. So for this specific session I have built my nested lab. You can also create your own nested lab even on your personal laptop. So currently 133 has only one uplink. I think I should restart this host so I can get the another adapter. So I just restarted my this host, so it will take some time. I will stop recording for now, and you can see here our ESXi 133 has 4 uplinks now. So we also need to attach another adapter on this host as well. So you already know that which option we would use. So I select this option and I select existing switch, and from here you could pick one adapter, VMNIC 1 for example, and now the other ESXi host has also 2 uplinks attached for management network as well. So this is a good practice, and even in production environment you have to use at least 2 uplinks, 2 adapters for each virtual switch, right? Okay, so that was one task. So there is another task, so let me start that task. My task is how much ESXi host we have. We have 2 ESXi hosts, right? On this host we have created virtual machine port group for test and development, and the ID of VLAN ID is 20, right? And VLAN 2 is already connected, right? You can consider it VM2 and this is VM4. So if you have another virtual machine on different host on a same cluster, and that virtual machine is also a part of VLAN 20, so if you notice here VM04 is connected to default virtual machine port group, which is this one, VM network, right? And VM02 is connected to test and development VM virtual machine port group. So if you want to connect these, if you want these two virtual machines to be communicate with each other, how much options we have? Can someone tell me? What would you do, Mr. Anyone? Okay,
You
but
create a port group,
on
create a new port group, attach it to it on the test dev
yep,
on 4.
exactly, yep, that's. And what would be the second option? The second option could be to migrate this virtual machine to this host and attach it to the uh, test and development
Port
port
group.
group. Yep, you got it.
Okay.
So this is not a good practice, because why would, if you have multiple hosts and you have multiple virtual machine, you cannot keep all these, and you and suppose if you cannot keep all the virtual machine on same host because of resources availability, so then the good practice is to create the same port group on each host, assign the same VLAN ID, and connect that specific virtual machine to this to that specific port group. Yep. So uh, task number 3 would be, sorry, I write tasked, so it is task number 3 is create port group on create new VM port group on new vSwitch and attach another uplink, right? So this is the task, right? So I'm doing this task number 3 right now, and why I'm doing this, because we have two options here. Either we can use this practice, the first one, we can create another VM port group on existing switch, or we can create another virtual switch and we can attach another uplink and we can create another port group, right? So it depends on your network structure, it depends on your physical host, physical uplinks attached to the your ESXi host on which you have installed in which you have installed ESXi, right? So let me create another port group. So I just select this host. Under configuration tab you can add networking option. We have, which option I would use now? I would use virtual machine port group for a standard switch, and right, we have two options: select an existing standard switch or create a new standard switch. So I will select new standard switch, right? By default the MTU size is 1500. You can also change this value, and why would we do that? It depends. Let's suppose if you want to use a jumbo frames, so this is something related to networking stuff, so I won't go in more in this portion, but you can change it. If any of you are familiar with jumbo frames, you can change this value, right? So I would keep it a default value and I will hit next button, and again, if your ESXi host has a free uplinks, so then this option is good. So I do have another uplinks available which are not currently assigned to any virtual switch, so I will pick one of these and I will select, and here you can give it a same name and the same VLAN ID, right? So we have another port group created on this newly created switch, right? If you want to connect this VM04, again you have to right click on this virtual machine and change the network connection from default VM port group to test and development port group. So that's the story, right? So now these two virtual machines would be able to communicate with each other because the two ESXi hosts are connected to same switch, same physical switch, right? And these two are connected to same port group and same VLAN ID they are using. So that is because of this scenario they both will. Yep.
How many like a virtual machine like on EX host you can create it, and then how you can create it how many port group you can create it in the virtual switch?
4,000 above.
Wow. Okay.
Yep. Okay. Thank you, Bobby.
Thank you.
Anyone else has any question? Let me stop recording for. So what we discussed three options, three tasks. Task number one was how to create virtual machine port group to a same switch, how to add another adapter to same switch, and we also did the task number three. So before moving forward to another slide or task, do you guys have anything in your mind which you want me to do? Any specific use case, any specific question related to your environment or your lab?
So if you have a cluster built together,
Mm-hmm.
these two EX. So if you have a different VLANs, the Vmotion will work to moving them up and down. Right? They have to be on the same port group, everything.
Okay, the video recording is on, Mr. Adil. Okay, Mr. Bobby, basically uh, we already discussed, I mean, as I mentioned, that the Vmotion criteria is I got your question, let me explain it to you. Basically, for Vmotion traffic, we configured the VM kernel port group on host level, not VM level, right?
Yes.
Okay, good. So if you have a virtual machine, right, which is a member of, which is connected to test and development port group, right? So if you want to migrate this virtual machine from this host to another host, so again this port should have the same port group available right now. But here even on this host, right? So you can do
Yep.
that. Yep, you can do that. And even now currently uh, if you don't have existing port group available on the other host, that is still possible. You can change
Okay.
the networking during Vmotion process.
Okay.
Yep. So you want before 6.7, I guess 6.7 or 6.5, there was a limitation that each ESXi should have, a host should have the same port group uh, for Vmotion if you want to move a virtual machine from one host to another host. But now you can change the networking option during Vmotion process.
That's good.
Yep. But your both ESXi hosts should have a layer 2 connectivity for Vmotion traffic. Okay, so let me discuss this option. Very good. You gave me an idea that which option I should discuss now, so let me discuss now. Maybe some of you don't know about Vmotion, right? So I won't explain it right now, but this is a feature, right? So if you want to set up a Vmotion traffic on each ESXi host, you need a VM kernel port group, right? So we already have a VM kernel port group available, right? To set up a Vmotion traffic, we have two options right now. Option one is to use the existing management virtual machine port group for Vmotion as well. So simply what you can do, you can simply right click on your existing VM kernel port group, you can hit edit button and you can enable Vmotion service on same VM kernel port group, which is not a good option, right? For Vmotion traffic, you need to create another VM kernel port group and the network should be different, right? Let me draw a diagram here. Before creating a vSphere environment, you should decide your management traffic, right? Your production VM traffic, right? Your iSCSI traffic, your Vmotion traffic, right? So we need to separate these traffic, right? So the best practice is to assign different VLANs to each, to use the different VLANs for each traffic. So in my case, for management traffic, I'm using this one, this subnet. Virtual machine production VM traffic could be anyone. It depends on your scenario. For iSCSI traffic, uh, let's suppose my IP range is this one, and this is just a simple lab, right? And this is my Vmotion traffic network, right? Maybe some of you are confused, but the sum of option would be covered in our upcoming modules. But since we are discussing virtual networks here, so I should explain it to you guys that if you have to create another VM kernel port group, right? So let's suppose I need another VM kernel port group for iSCSI traffic, right? So what I can do on ESXi 132, right, I can create another switch. I can select VM kernel network adapter. So in this module, just learn how to create another VM kernel port group. What is iSCSI, what is Vmotion, all these things would be covered in our next modules. So iSCSI would be covered in module number 6 and Vmotion would be covered in module number 7, right? So just our purpose is to learn how to create VM kernel port group, how to modify the virtual switches, right? So our next task is task number 4. In this task we will learn how to create another VM kernel port group, right? And in brackets we will write iSCSI traffic, right? So the best practice is to separate the storage traffic from the management traffic, right? So we already have one virtual switch created on this host, and our test virtual machine are connected to this vSwitch 0, and our management VM kernel port group is created on this switch. So I can also create another VM kernel port group on same virtual switch, but based on VMware recommendation, I should create another switch, I should attach another uplinks, and I should create another VM kernel port group, and even I should use another VLAN, and I should use another IP range, and the physical adapter should also be connected to a different physical switch. If not, then we should also create VLANs for our storage traffic as well, right? So this is the best practice. So I'm not discussing the physical scenario, so I will just focus on this thing. So I will hit add networking option. Before doing this task, you should have another free uplink available. So we currently have VMNIC 2 and VMNIC 3 available. So for example, I'm using this port for storage traffic. So I will go to virtual switch option. Again, I'm sorry, I'm just taking 1 minute. So I was talking about that now we need to create another port group, right? So here you can hit add networking option, and you should first read all these options. So we are doing VM kernel network adapter portion right now. So I just select VM kernel network adapter, right? We have three options. Select an existing network, right? Select an existing standard switch, or you can create another switch. So I'm going to create another switch. So I select new standard switch, right? um, Again, we need to attach uplink. So VMNIC, so I just attach another uplink to the new switch, right? And here you can give it a name. So for example, this is my iSCSI traffic, right? So if you want to assign a different VLAN ID, you can. By default, the MTU size is 1500. You can change the value, right? We will discuss this TCP IP stack that is by default, so we will discuss it. It is asking you that for which purpose you are creating this VM kernel port group. So I'm not using any of these services for this VM kernel port group, so I will just keep it as it is.
Question: when you putting a VLAN 30, does it really matter? It's really tagging somewhere, that VLAN 30 somewhere on the back end, on the switchboard. That's how it's working.
Yep, because okay, basically um, you can see here we have this management port group, and we have this vSphere, and we have this one, right? So for this VM kernel port group, if your VLAN ID is VLAN 30, right? Sorry, my mouse is not working. So
Hello, this is an apology call from your utility company.
okay, sorry. So the all these uh, uplinks are acting as a trunk port, right? So which is why we need to assign a specific VLAN, right? Are you getting this
Okay.
thing? Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Again, we need to assign IP address, because on VM kernel port group we need to specify IP address as well. So my storage subnet is this one. Let's suppose this is my subnet mask. In production environment it could be different one, but I'm using a default one right now because I want to make it simple. By default, the default gateway is this one, which is our management default gateway, but for this specific one, if you need to change the default gateway, you can change it. But technically we don't need a default gateway for iSCSI storage because we are just communicating inside the network, so we don't need it. And this is how you can create another port group, VM kernel port group for iSCSI traffic. So if you have to do the same on ESXi133, so we already have vSwitch 1, right? We already have physical uplink attached. So and also, so I can just add networking. I can use the same switch for the VM kernel adapter, the SCSI traffic. I will use the same switch, existing switch. Suppose I have, and the VLAN ID is 30, and I can use IP address on this range. And we are done. So we have created another VM kernel port group on another host as well, right? So this is how you can separate your storage traffic from the management traffic. Does it make sense?
Yes, sir.
Perfect. Okay, one more thing I should discuss, and then we can end this session for today, and we can resume it tomorrow. Okay, so we do have another, we also need another VM kernel port group for Vmotion traffic, right? Before doing this, we need to understand the TCP/IP configuration, and we need to understand different IP stack, right? So we have by default stack, which is used for the management purpose, and we do have another. So I would suggest you guys to read something about the TCP/IP stack of VMware vSphere, right? So we do have provisioning IP stack, we have default stack, and we have vMotion. So this is a topic of module number 7. So unfortunately I cannot explain it right now, but I can just show you how we can use it during creation of VM kernel port group for vMotion traffic, right? So as you can see here, we do have adapter available on this host VMNEC3, and we do have adapter available on the other host as well, free adapter. So let me start from here, and I need to create another port group, virtual machine port or VM kernel port group for vMotion traffic. So I can just hit add networking, VM kernel network adapter. I want to create a new switch, and here I can attach VMNEC3, right? And I just give it a name, vMotion traffic. We have different option. If you for example, my VLAN ID for this is 40. I can use default IP stack, and I can hit vMotion. So what is the difference of this default IP stack or what and this one? So if I select vMotion, so that means on this VM kernel port group I can use this VM kernel port group only for vMotion traffic, not for management traffic, not for iSCSI traffic, not for vSAN traffic. But if you don't have another VM kernel port group and you want to use the same VM kernel port group for different services, then you can select TCP IP stack, and you can select vMotion, you can select vSAN, you can select FT logging. Is it fine?
Yes, sir.
For now I will use the TCP/IP stack of Vmotion, so I just select Vmotion, right? And here you can assign IP address in the range of your Vmotion. So again, it depends on your network topology, and the same step I can do on host number 2. So I hope some of the concept would be clear to you guys now.
Yes, it's good.
So you can also verify this your settings from this option. You can go to VM kernel adapters, and here you can see this ESXi host has 3 VM kernel port groups. One is for management, other is for iSCSI, other is for Vmotion, right? Again, this is a question mark on your physical side, physical networking. So it depends. I mean, there are some other steps required on your physical network side as well, right? But as an vSphere administrator, these are our responsibilities. So I'm just covering this virtual switches or virtual networks portion right now, right? Any questions so far? So let me try to cover some of the slides, and then we can stop the session. So let's discuss this slide tomorrow, because there are some options I want to be clear to you guys. So see you guys tomorrow then. I'm just stop recording and I'm